Hey there, Pursuing Freedom friends. Thanks again for listening today. I'm excited to introduce you all to Eric Sultan with ReMax of Cherry Creek in Denver, Colorado. And Eric got into the business in 2007, not long after I did. So we've already been kind of laughing about what it looked like being newbies in the industry going through 2008, 2009. And he's going to tell us a little bit about his story and his journey from being a one-man band to having a growing team and basically just finding that work-life balance and having a successful business. So I'm sure we're all going to learn something here today, and I'm excited to jump right in. So with no further ado, Eric, thank you for being on the show today. And we always start from the beginning. So tell us what prompted you to have the crazy idea of getting into real estate and what your journey's looked like since then.
Well, I had my wife and I were both bartenders, and she quit bartending. She got a day job as an interior designer, and I was a little bit of a procrastinator. And she got up at 6 o'clock one morning to leave for work, and I had gotten home about 2 hours before that, and I realized I was never going to see her again unless I changed careers. So I interviewed about a dozen people in different in different occupations that I was qualified to enter. And there weren't that many. I looked at route sales, I looked at lending, I looked at appraisals, home inspection, and real estate. And I interviewed everybody I knew in those different professions, and everybody was really sad except for the two realtors that I talked to. They were super happy and perky, and they were loving life. And it might have just been the luck of the draw that I picked two happy realtors to talk to, but I just said to myself, well, these people are really happy, so this is the job I want to do. And I went home. I told my wife, okay, I've decided I want to be a realtor, and I've looked into it. I should be able to get licensed within a year, and get a business up and running within a year and a half, 2 years. And she pulled out her laptop and started banging away on the keys and said, you can be in real estate class in a week, and you can be a licensed realtor in about 2.5 months. I think that's the way we're going to do it. And that's exactly what I did.
That's awesome. So now did you keep bartending for a while you got your feet under you? Or did you kind of just say, I'm going all in and quit bartending and go right into real estate full on?
I burned the boats 100%. I knew that I was making enough money bartending that if I tried to do both at the same time, I would go back to bartending. So I just quit bartending completely and sold real estate. The day I got my license, I stopped bartending. Even when I went to real estate school, I had built up a little bit of savings and only bartended on the weekends when I was in real estate school.
That's awesome. I ask this question a lot of people, folks that tried to moonlight a couple jobs before they went full-time into real estate, and then folks that kind of just dove right in head first. And from what I've heard, most people would advise dive right in head first. Don't try to be doing multiple things. It requires your full attention to have rapid success. Would you agree? I mean, would you do it the same way if you were doing it again?
Absolutely. And anybody who comes to work for me, I tell them the same thing.
Yeah, no part-time jobs. You're here to, this is it. Your primary focus is real estate.
Yep.
So what was your game plan when you jumped in like that? Because the interesting thing about our industry is that you can get your real estate license and still not have any idea how to sell real estate or actually find clients or have a success plan. So did you get coaching right away? Did you wing it? What did it look like when you jumped in?
While I was in real estate school, I read Gary Keller's Millionaire Real Estate Broker?
No, real estate. I'm reading it right now. That's why I know. It's good. It's awesome.
It was great. There were a couple of other books I read, Up and Running in 90 Days, I think. And I took a bunch of notes from those and realized that what I had to do was go into an office every day, call everybody I knew, send out notes to everybody I knew. I had a plan for working my sphere, and I knew a ton of people at that point. I didn't realize that those people that I knew they knew me as a guy that juggled and blew fire behind a bar, and not somebody who they would trust with a $500,000 sale or purchase. So it took me a long time to really to activate my sphere. I think it took me longer to get business from my sphere than it would for most people, especially most people that had as many people that liked them as I had. But I worked open houses, and I worked open houses every Saturday and Sunday for the first 3 or 4 years that I sold real estate. About 40 weekends a year. I was probably doing 60 or 70 open houses every year.
That's awesome. I've heard a number of people that just getting off the ground, that's the way to do it. Is like, you got to get out there, and whatever the one thing is, and it sounds like that was working for you, then just do a lot of that thing that works. So,
yep.
Did you join a team right away, or did you just go out as a solo agent out of the gates?
There was somebody that I worked with who was at Keller Williams when I started selling real estate, and he offered to start a team with me when I went to work at Keller Williams, and he mentored me. So Ron Martinez, who'd been in the business for a long time, took me under his wing. I worked with him for a while, and our particular office, it sort of started, it kind of sprung a leak, and a lot of people went to ReMax Cherry Creek in Denver. A lot of people went to what was Fuller Sotheby's or Fuller Real Estate back then. And he wound up leaving, and I wound up alone after a year. And I'd been working with, I was helping show properties for a few of the agents who would come to ReMax of Cherry Creek. And I wound up sort of visiting the office a bunch of times and seeing all these names that I would see on real estate signs as I was going through, as I was working with buyers. I would see all these names, and I realized that a lot of top brokers worked at ReMax of Cherry Creek, and I had an opportunity to come in. They started in sort of ill-fated program called Rising Stars. I was one of 8 agents in Rising Stars, and one of 2 that remained there after the first year, I think. And that's how I wound up at ReMax of Cherry Creek, a place that probably shouldn't have let me hang my license there when I first did, but I got kind of lucky.
Awesome. So when you talk about the open houses, and you mentioned that there were folks at a different company, so I didn't realize that if you're working open houses, I mean, you can work open houses for anyone from any company. It doesn't really matter, right? Because they're gonna pay that whatever fee, I guess they would pay. It doesn't matter. They don't care what company you're with, right?
It just depends. I was working open houses for people anywhere, and it didn't cost them any. There was no difference in the price of having an open house. It was free. I was doing their open house. So a lot of the time people were just completely open to me working their open houses. But I think that it goes, people who have teams will generally give first dibs to their open houses to people on their teams, and then goes out to people in their office. But especially during times when not a lot of people want to work open houses, you'll give them to anybody if you have a seller who wants to have an open house.
So when you made that transition from Keller Williams to ReMax, was that right around that 2008, 2009 time? Because you mentioned you had been with that guy Ron for a year, and then he left, and then you kind of transitioned. Was it right in the middle of that downturn time?
Yeah, it was right at the beginning of that downturn, and it was a strange time for me to be in real estate and just trying to build a business, but I didn't know any better. I had no idea, and making that move was a good time to make the move because my business wasn't that big yet, and it was fairly easy.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this before we were recording, but a lot of people ask, 2008, 2009, when you just got into the business a year or two prior, how's it going for you? Oh my gosh. And it's like, well, I I had nowhere to go but up, coming from teaching and bartending. And so I didn't know any better, that other people's businesses were crashing and I was just getting mine going, you know? And speaking of that, you know, sometimes I feel like we kind of glaze over what you mentioned. You know, it was really hard for me. I marketed a ton to my sphere, but they weren't necessarily ready to trust me with their $500,000 purchases and sales because I had come from bartending and all these things. And I think sometimes that we focus so much on people's success that we sometimes glaze over just how hard it is to get going. I mean, there had to be some level of perseverance there for you to be putting yourself out there to your sphere like you did. You just jumped right in and you put yourself out there, and you maybe didn't see it click right away. And then you were working open houses 40 weekends a year. So, I mean, what kind of days, hours do you think you were putting in when you were getting your business off the ground?
I think when you're selling real estate, I kind of feel like it always depends on who you're asking. If you ask me how many hours I was putting in, I probably would have told you 40 to 50 hours, even in the beginning when I was working a lot. If you would ask my wife how many hours I was putting in, she probably would have told you 80 to 100 hours a week, because there was always something going on. There was always answering the phone, always working every Saturday and Sunday, even if it was, I would look at a 2-hour open house or a 3-hour open house as working 2 or 3 hours. She would look at it as, okay, so you get up at 8 o'clock in the morning, you fill your car with signs, you go driving around a neighborhood for an hour and a half, putting out, I would always put out 40 signs for every open house I worked, because I wanted people to think that I was the neighborhood expert. So I would put a zillion signs all over somebody's neighborhood, and then I would try to focus on that neighborhood at least for a number of months. And I would focus on the Highlands and Washington Park, which were two neighborhoods that sort of fed each other. And then I would spend, an hour and a half picking up signs. And then I would usually wind up with 1 or 2 showings after an open house. So what felt like a 3 or 4 hour day to me was really more of like an 8-hour day. That was Saturday and Sunday. And then every weekday I would go into the gym at 6 o'clock in the morning, which I'm not doing now, but I was doing then. And then I would go straight into the office and be in the office by 8, set up, make all my phone calls to all these people that weren't working with me. But I knew I needed to continue to keep contacts with them. And for 2 days a week, I would do tons of follow-up from all my open houses, because I knew that those were my hottest prospects to actually have some sort of an income. And then leave the office at 5 or 6, but continue to field phone calls until whenever. So there were long days, but there was also flexibility. I could take a Thursday off every once in a while and go skiing, or I can go hiking on a weekday. I didn't have to worry about traffic. It still felt great. It was a heck of a lot better than bartending.
Well, I mean, you touched upon a couple of things there that I think are important. Mm-hmm. One is that you worked your ass off. I mean, you got in there and you worked mm-hmm. until it clicked. And I think that that's important. I mean, I think that consistency of just showing up and persevering is the key. That, eventually you're going to see the results, but you put in the legwork. It's not like you just jumped in and got lucky. Like, you worked hard. And then, the other thing you're talking about is appreciating the trade-off of the flexibility. And on one of the early podcast recordings with Jennifer Hughes, she talks about how, I love it, because she lives in Winter Park, Colorado, a ski town, and she skis every day, or she mountain bikes every day, but she works every day. She loves this job. She loves real estate, and she also loves what it affords her, which is the lifestyle of being able to have that flexibility. So, it's good. It's like you're appreciating the freedom, but you're not. I mean, there's a lot of folks that get into real estate and they appreciate the freedom, and then they just don't put in the work. And then it's like, well, then the results don't show up, right? So I think you've got to appreciate the freedom as the trade-off for doing all that hard work. So kudos to you for sticking it out. Now, you mentioned that you read The Millionaire Real Estate Agent while you were getting your license, which is interesting to me because it's very much focused on scaling your business. And it's kind of like a textbook for somebody who's new in the business, because I mean, it's kind of dense, you know? So
Mhm.
did you know getting into real estate that you would have a team one day because of that?
Getting into real estate, I thought that even with all the reading I did, I thought that I was going to come into real estate and work as a solo agent and get myself to a point where I was making $60,000 a year and continue doing that, you know, working hard, 40 hours a week for 60 grand a year, and make that my career. And it would have been fine. That would have been fine. It wasn't exactly the way it happened. I looked at a lot of millionaire real estate agent and thought, wow, this is some amazing stuff. And it felt kind of pie in the sky. I remember talking to some people in my real estate classes, and they were telling me how much money they were going to make. And I was like, yeah, that sounds like a whole lot of money. When they were talking about making six figures, I was like, I don't have a college degree. I don't think that's ever going to happen to me. You know, I'm going to work pretty hard and I'll make a good living. And it wound up working out a little better than I thought. And the team really came about when I had a few years where I had more work than I knew what to do with. Where I had these weekends where I would have had to overlap appointments in order to do everything I needed to do. And I was calling on other people's buyers agents to take over my buyers for cash. I would just tell people, hey, I'll give you $150 if you could take these people out and show them 3 houses. And I'm either out with another client or I'm out with my family. And in both of those things, I wanted to really be able to give my attention to. I didn't want to be half in and half out with my clients who trust me, or with my family who loves me. And so I decided I needed to have somebody who could take that spillover, and I wanted that person to be closer than other people in my office. I wanted them to kind of represent the same ideals that I represent. So, you know how things, when you start focusing on things and they just, when you're thinking about them a lot, you kind of move in that direction. And I was doing my phone calls, and every time I would pick up the phone to call my sphere, I'd wind up on the phone with a couple of people who, instead of trying to explain to them why they should work with me, or even instead of even asking them about what was going on in their lives, I would always wind up saying, you know, you'd be great at this. Why aren't you selling real estate? Why are you still tending bar? And so I wound up on the phone with Joseph Newman, and instead of me asking him, hey, why aren't you selling real estate like I had done the previous 3 phone calls, he said, you know, Eric, I think I'm ready to start selling real estate. And I said, that's perfect, because I have space in my life for you right now.
Right.
Let's sit down and talk. And within 5 or 6 months, he was selling real estate with me as a buyer's agent, but it was purposeful. We knew that he was going to move into being my partner as long as everything worked out.
And so when was that?
He got licensed and really started working with me in April of 2016. I had him out kind of working with buyers and out working with me. You know, he opened a couple of doors for people within the month or so before that. So I think he had his first closing on a 50-50 deal with me a week after he got his real estate license.
Wow. Awesome. And
Yeah.
you guys knew each other from the bar industry?
Yeah, we did. He was a bartender. He worked as a DJ a little bit. He was a chef. He owned restaurants. He still owns a restaurant. And that's just where we knew each other. And I felt like I could train someone who came from restaurants and bars
Yeah.
better than I could train anybody else, because I knew the things that I told myself, and I knew the type of work ethic that I have, which is different from the type of work ethic that an attorney who works 70 hours a week might have. We have a different kind of purpose. And I knew that I could work with his kind of purpose better than the type of purpose somebody else has, and the type of service orientation that he had, which was similar to what I had. And I always knew that I spent years telling myself, hey, at least you're not going into work to count bottles of liquor today at 8 o'clock in the morning. You're going in to build your business today at 8 o'clock in the morning. And at least you're going home today at 7 o'clock in the evening after doing a bunch of showings, not you're getting ready to put on your tie and go sling drinks for the next 7 hours at 7 o'clock in the evening. I knew those things about working in the restaurant business that were the buttons for people who work in the restaurant business, because I've been there my whole life.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's a great industry to recruit from, because it's not just, it's work ethic, it's adaptability, it's people skills, it's customer service, it's all of those things. So I'm happy for you that worked out, and that it stuck with him, and you guys have that partnership. So what does your team look like today then? Where did it go from there?
So he wound up selling 15 houses for about $7 million in that first 6 months that he worked with me. And then in the next year, he sold 38 houses. He put like 25,000 miles on his car. It was about half leads that he got from me, and then a bunch of stuff he got from his sphere. And then he was working open houses. He just worked nonstop. And I went home, and I would talk to my wife every day, and she would tell me at least once a week, you got to stop him from working so much, because he's going to burn out, and you're going to ruin your friend, and he's not going to be any good to himself. He's not going to be any good to you. And so you have to convince him to partner up with you and get somebody to take both of your overflow. And that's what I did. It's still a little hard to wrench deals and leads away from him and get them to the next level. But he's beginning to see, he told me he only wants to sell between 30 and 35 houses in this next year. And that's good for him. He was on a trajectory where he might've been selling 45 houses on his own, and would probably be thinking about getting out of this business, doing something that was a little bit more sane. So we partnered up officially. It's been over a certain amount of time, but he bought half of my share in ReMax of Cherry Creek early in 2018. And we got a shared credit card early in 2018. We started sharing all of our online leads and all of our advertising costs. And we pulled in a director of operations, which has been great for us, and a buyer's agent, which has been great for us. The buyer's agent has been we pulled her in March of 2018, and she sprained her ankle in April of 2018. She found out that ankle sprain was a broken tibia.
Oh.
A month after it happened, had to have it rebroken. And so our buyer's agent wound up basically at home on her back, and then in a wheelchair, and then in a boot for like 4 months of 2018. So we spent a lot of time trying to fill in for what we thought was going to be our buyer's agent's position, and trying to help her get back up on her feet, literally, for a long time last year. So this year we're expecting her to be able to really flourish this year, and really have those kinds of life-changing business that you expect when you get into real estate, or that I expect for people that I work with in real estate. I hope that doing this changes their life for the better, and instead for her, she wound up with a broken leg and a lot of pain. So,
oh my gosh! Well, 2019 is going to be her best year ever, I'm sure. So,
I am sure that 2019 is going to be her best year. She doesn't have much pain. She's got some nuts and bolts and pins in her leg, but she's walking around just fine. And I don't know if she's gotten any skiing days in yet, but she's ready for it.
Awesome. So let's talk about how you found her, and how did you find your buyer's agent, and who came first, the director of operations or the buyer's agent? Because I want to dig into both.
Buyer's agent, we knew we wanted both, and the buyer's agent came into the business just a little before the director of operations, but it was only about 3 or 4 weeks before the director of operations. We were in the market for the director of operations first, but we felt like that was we felt like filling that position was a bigger deal. It was something that was going to be harder for us. It was somebody that was going to require more of our personal training and more of our time. And we really wanted to make sure that that was going to be somebody who was going to be with us for years, even though from all the conversations I've had with other agents and team leaders, that's not something you can really count on. We wanted to have the best shot at that. So hiring her took a long time. We did a lot of advertising. We advertised on Indeed. That was where we wound up finding her. We looked in all of our spheres. There was just nobody had the best recommendations, and it got a little scary going to our spheres for help with employment, because I really didn't want to say no to people who came from great referral partners. You know, I've got these people who give me a lot of referrals in my business, and then they refer somebody to work with me. And there were at least 2 or 3 times that I had to say, you know, this isn't a perfect fit. You're great, and you come from a great source, but you're not exactly what we're looking for. And because of that, we sort of nixed it. We said, we got to stop going to our referral partners for help with employment, because we want those people to continue feeling really comfortable giving us people that we can say yes to, because it's in our wheelhouse. We can always say yes. If you're looking to buy or sell a house in Denver, there's a way that we can say yes to you, unless you don't have the internet, in which case we have to say no.
So I think that I would love to know anything you can share in terms of how did you develop a job description for a director of operations, and how did you write that, write that description for Indeed and then screen that person? Because I think, ironically, I mentioned I'm reading that, the Millionaire Real Estate Agent right now, and it talks about the importance of hiring admin help first. So like get admin help to create the systems so that when you do onboard sales support, you're onboarding them to an organized organization. And that's redundant, right? But I had some conversations with a couple of agents that are ready to bring on support, and they're like, well, I need to write out all my ops manuals. I need to write out my procedures. I need to get everything organized before I bring on help. And I was like, you need to bring on help to do that for you, because while you're doing that, you won't be growing your business. And then how are you going to justify having support? So how did you go about like identifying the job description, getting it out there, and then screening the applicants?
Well, first of all, I'm a big Seth Godin fan. And so I really like to put together the architecture quick and then just ship. Just get something that's worthy of moving forward on, and then move forward as fast as I can, even if it's not perfect. And it wasn't perfect. Our job description was pretty dynamic. I didn't have any idea how dynamic it was going to be. I'm not in the business of hiring. My partner does a lot more hiring than I do, but I had more of the idea of what we really wanted in our director of operations than he did. So he helped craft and helped with a lot more of the interviewing, and we really put our heads together. At that point, when we were getting to hiring, when we put together the job description, from what I remember, it was mostly conversations between me and my partner, and then I got, half an hour, and I just sat down and I just busted out what I really wanted. I had spent a lot of years being a writer. I had, when I was really young, I was a poet, and I traveled the country as a poet for a few years. So
that came out. I wasn't
the best way.
That, so.
We all had our hobo days, and those were my hobo days. Just
I love it.
Greyhound buses and hitchhiking around the country, reading poetry and getting paid, like $20 to read poetry in a bar. But the way I think best is to kind of sit alone in a room and just write real fast. And I just wrote out a job description. I knew that the real core of the job description that I had was a project manager job description. And our initial ad was actually a project manager ad. We put our ad in a few different places on Indeed when we had decided what we wanted to do. But the first place was project manager, and that's actually where we wound up with our director of operations. So what I had pictured was really somebody who I could give projects to, like set up and run my CRM, and give big projects to, like different types of marketing. I want to market to this group of people. Please figure out how we can find these people, how we can speak to these people, how we can hear from these people, and initiate that, and take a couple months doing that. I wanted somebody who could do 3 or 4 big projects that would bring in a lot of business for us at a time, knock out those projects, and then pick up one project and just do those bigger things, and then run the projects that they've started. And that kind of wound up working out. I mean, it's messier than that. It's a lot messier than that, but we initiated a few projects, the biggest one being really nailing down a CRM and really figuring out how to use it. And then there were a few others, and a lot of those have kind of fizzled out. We wanted to get some Facebook business. I've had I'm getting about 20% of my business from online sources now. And I wanted to grow that because I've seen a lot of my listing business leave Denver because it's expensive. So I've had a lot of people say, you know what, I've made a lot of money in the past 10 years or the past 2 years on my house, I'm going to sell and I'm going to move to Idaho. I've had people move to Idaho. I had somebody move to Buffalo, New York. And after 2 years in their home in Denver, they bought a house outright with cash in Buffalo. They didn't really want to go there, but they had some family there and they could afford a home. So I had 6 people leave Denver in 2017. I think I had 7 or 8 people leave Denver in 2018, and that's just from my sales. So I've been trying to find online avenues to fill those gaps of people who aren't going to be able to give me that many referrals. So we did some Facebook marketing, which didn't amount to a whole lot. We're doing a lot of Zillow marketing, and I don't know if you've looked at Zillow for realtors right now, but they've, for the first time in 4 or 5 years, they're completely sold out. I've never seen Zillow sold out. So we're looking for more online avenues, and that's going to be the big project she's doing as we move forward kind of this year.
That's awesome. And I love, talking about how it's messier than that, is that we, when we did the job description for someone who, I love that project manager, because I basically told her, I was like, I have a lot of ideas, and I also do a lot of research, and I read a lot of books, and I get a lot of ideas from the podcast. And I'm going to basically come to you and say, I heard about this thing that we can do to grow our business. I want you to look into it and implement it. I mean, this podcast wouldn't even be happening if it wasn't for Nicole,
Really?
No, I mean, I mean, till death do us part, Nicole, if you're listening, right? Like, don't leave me ever. I need you. Anyway, no, but when I did the job description, I actually talked a lot about the fact that, like, while there's some level of routine and we're looking for someone detail-oriented and very organized, this business is different every day. And so you have to be able to adapt. And I think that's what makes it addicting to those of us who stick it out, right? And makes it challenging for people that want some level of monotony or repetition in their life, right? But if people can jump in and feed off of the fact that, like, it is going to be a little messy, it's also going to be fun, and it's going to be challenging, and it's going to be rewarding, and all those good things. So awesome. Well, that's super helpful. I think a lot of our listeners will get a lot from that, in terms of just kind of identifying how to get the right support and what to do from there. So I don't want to keep you any longer, because I promised we would wrap up. But I do want to say thank you so much. I know how busy you are, and I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the show today. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Erin.
And thanks, everyone, for tuning in today. And as always, if you like the content you're hearing here, please make sure to leave a review on the iTunes podcast, because it helps us attract awesome people like Eric and help the content get found. So appreciate all of you for tuning in today. Make it an awesome day and the best year ever.